Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us and being a part of our discussion today as we're continuing this community and addictions. We're joined once more by Jessica, and so thank you so much for coming back. Last time we came together and we introduced the topic of entering into treatment, and so the previous session, what did that look like coming back into that place? And so now to kind of bridge our discussion today, um, what kind of points can you tell us about them being in treatment, and what kind of questions are common during that time frame?
A lot of it is about the involvement. So, family is very involved. The treatment team is going to want the family to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
As long as the person coming into treatment fills out the right paperwork to allow us to talk to somebody, we encourage family to call and ask questions, at all times. They can ask, whatever team member that they want to speak with, or we can help them through that also.
Okay.
A lot of families don't realize that what we try to do is set up a direct connection because treatment is hard. And sometimes the addict is going to, maybe play a couple games when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to that. We've had,
Maybe.
yeah,
Maybe.
like
It's
we've
because
had
we know it
people
happens.
swear up and down we're kicking them out, and we're not kicking them out, they're leaving.
Yeah.
But anything to get mom to come and pick them up, dad to come and pick them up,
Right.
and sometimes all it takes is a phone call to fact check.
Yeah.
you know
Well, so what I'm hearing there is like there's this. It's almost like you can't require them to sign the papers for releasing information, but you highly encourage it,
Oh, absolutely.
and to really, because um you want that connection, because again there's a longer time frame that's going to happen beyond the recovery process, and so having that family adequately informed of what's going on, is it possible, and I'm trying to frame the question in my mind, the idea of having the family informed of the treatment helps them that when their loved one contacts them, the family knows uh, the lies, the wool going over their eyes. They hey, mom, dad, they're kicking me out, like you said earlier. No, they gave us information. They're not kicking you out. Like, they're able to work with you as an advocate for you guys, as opposed to they're only hearing the voice of their loved one.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of people they think that it's love, but to come and get your family member out of treatment is really not good for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely not. They're there for, in the first place for a reason. And it's 28 days, and really that's not in a span of, maybe because I'm getting older, it's really not that long.
Right.
28 days passes by in the blink of an eye. But that is a lot of time to be able to pull them out of their environment and work on them. But it's not just them. Addiction is a family disease.
Mm-hmm.
It does no good to, pick up a spoon and clean it and then throw it back in dirty water, right?
Right.
So we have to try to help everybody all the way around because, sometimes it's your environment also.
Yeah.
Not bad, but
Yeah.
just a lot of times it's not that the family or loved ones are hindering it. It's that they don't have the knowledge.
Right. Well, and that's kind of like you use the word family disease, and I like that, because that you're there's two things that I will put together when I think of a family disease. I think of um, learned behavior. Hey, this is what my family does. This is what this person does. That, and it just that learned behavior kind of trickles down. And then, like you also said, environment. So if they're in an environment, and that by environment I mean the what are the family relationships are like? What is the cleanliness of the house? What is the stress levels involved, and all those things that are environmental, like you said, that compound and build in just kind of a petri dish
Mm-hmm.
for usage, if that kind of makes sense. Um, I've heard individuals say that they wanted to take something for energy because they needed to raise their kids, they needed to clean their house, and so they start taking something for energy, not realizing the other effects that occur because of what the high does in them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so kind of like, I take it for energy, but then because the mind's blown, nothing's happening anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of that um, working to address that family environment while you're so you're it sounds like you're addressing two areas. One, you're addressing the environment, learned behavior, family disease, as well as having the individual who is, lack of a better word, the symptom of this of what is going
Mm-hmm.
on. That's, I don't know if that's an appropriate way of putting it. Um,
Yeah, it's actually all around. Treatment center is what we do is patient centered care,
mhm,
and so that is focusing on the patient itself. And for recovery, we work with what's called recovery capital.
mhm,
And it's kind of like a person's net worth. Well, recovery capital is all the things combined that's going to help or hinder your recovery.
okay,
Different aspects of recovery capital are financial,
right,
whether that be employment or like disability or anything that can help you, government help. Then there's also environmental, and that's where you're living. Do you have a home? Do you have a quality home? Are you
right,
worried about getting kicked out every day? Is your home full of people who are using? Is it not necessarily using, but people who are toxic triggers?
right,
Things like that. Are you not wanted there? So it's not just about the patient, it's also about everybody else too.
right,
And so we work on all of that, like all areas. We work on your health, we work on your spiritual health, we work on your physical health, of course.
yeah,
We work on your emotional health. How are you managing your emotions? We work on your employment. If you leave here, are you going back to the job at the bar?
right,
I regularly set people up with jobs and stuff. Before they even leave, we start looking at different options.
mhm,
I help people file for state help. We're constantly, there's a free cell phone from the government that I help set people up for. We're trying to do the all around care too.
mhm,
And that also includes the family and different meetings and things like that. Unfortunately, a lot of times, the professionals don't have as much access to the family.
right,
We don't, if somebody's in treatment, we're not going to call their wife every single day.
right,
We're trying to focus our efforts on the person afflicted with the substance use disorder, but we also want to clean up the environment too and just kind of help and, encourage them. And a lot of times when you get an addict in treatment, they work so hard over those 28 days that they feel like, give or take. But generally, it's a 28-day it's either a 28-day or a 90-day program. But generally, they'll come out after 28 days and they think they're different, and they
mhm,
can be extremely different. And so a lot of times the issue that we have as an addict comes out after 28 days and feels like everybody else should see all of the changes that they made,
right,
for whereas for that family member, it's been a month.
right,
Last time I saw you, you were doing this, and now I see you now. So
right,
it's not, the addict feels like all should be forgiven when I come home, and it's all going to be, sunshine and rainbows, and it's going to be different because I'm different. And
right,
unfortunately, the world continues,
right.
out there, and people still have those issues that, yes, you are clean and sober now, but you do have to go back and make amends for.
Is there, because one of the things I the kind of that bridging the time from the the they're in treatment, that you're helping them and counseling them through all of those, getting the jobs, the phones, the helps, the helping them with their environment, and you're focusing your energies there. Is there a way, and this is either this is an idea for people to consider, or maybe it's already in place, but is there, you made the comment that, you're not calling that person's wife every so often. Is there ways where while they're in treatment, they have counseling services available where you can bring, whether it's a spouse or, where they can come in and offer that kind of that counseling for the family
Mm-hmm.
on how to um, better help, without violating HIPAA. Because let's say they did not sign that release form, but they're still in treatment, but they did not sign the release form. Is there an avenue for that family to receive proper good counseling when this loved one comes back out of treatment?
We can work in hypotheticals.
Okay.
Somebody could possibly call me and say, "Hey, I have a family member who is an addict. I need
Mm-hmm.
advice." It doesn't have to specify that particular person. But unfortunately, our hands are pretty tied when it comes to
Right.
how much we can deal with the family, and that is for the family to, if you put your brother in treatment and he refuses to sign paperwork for you, I can't talk to you, but you
Right.
can encourage him.
Right.
You can encourage that end and be like, I need to talk to them, and
Right.
I'll encourage on my end,
There's
but
such a thing as called Al-Anon,
yeah.
So it doesn't have to be all treatment involved.
Right.
But one of the things I was thinking about while you guys were talking was that as an addict, I go to treatment and I'm not happy because I really don't want to be there.
Right.
So I know that if the people who surrounded me don't get healthy, that I can probably fall back into my bullshit and my addiction, and I can manipulate that, and I can, so I think that it's probably really important that family or spouse or whatever is involved almost from the beginning, because they need to get healthy too. Not that their sickness is addiction or whatever, but everything is connected and can be what's the word, just whether you know it or not, you're sick.
Right.
And I'm not trying to say like, there's something wrong with you or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that to use my situation is that they had a tendency to ignore what I was doing, and they kind of denied to themselves how really bad it was, and who the people that it was affecting, and because they didn't want to believe that. They want to see you as you're still that good little kid that I used to know, and so they are dishonest with themselves, and I think I would probably do the same. You want to you want to see things in a certain way. So if you get involved right away, you can start to see almost immediately that, okay, this is a family disease, like you said,
Oh,
or
yeah.
whatever, and that we all have our roles. And why am I playing this role? Because I don't want to see the person I love die.
Right.
Because that's what happens: jails, institutions, and death. So I don't want to see that person die. So what do I need to do?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the I don't know, the way you should see it.
The attitude.
But because you're still stuck in that, you don't always see it that way. You look at it like, well, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And that's not
yeah.
the way that we should approach this. It should be approached as, okay, there is a problem.
Right. Well, the humble response, is, what have I done to contribute to this? Is kind of like, and that's because again, being a family disease,
I don't know that.
contribute?
I don't know that that's what I'm saying.
But
it's more like,
it's a
okay, so
perspective.
as an addict,
Yeah.
if I come out and I know that you haven't participated in any of this, you don't know all the little
Right.
things, I'm going to manipulate you.
Oh, yeah,
and
absolutely.
I'm going to make my way back to getting high.
Yeah.
And because that's what I do. I'm an addict and I want to get high.
Right.
So how do I do that? I keep you in the dark, because then you never actually learn how to
Right.
to see and point those things out to me, So it's not that you're wrong,
No.
or that you're bad or anything like that. It's that if you really want to see that addict, move forward and stay in recovery, then you need to be able to understand what those signs look like when they're starting to back into a relapse.
Let me kind of reframe it, because I said what is my part and what have I done. I think the better thing is, what is my part to play in the whole process. Because again, having that, taking the role as the family member, so not in the treatment, not the recovery, but as a family member, what is my part in this process?
Right.
and realizing this person's going to be reintroduced into my life because family, right? And so the healthy thing is if you have that kind of that mindset, then when they're going through treatment for themselves, eh, kind of finding a treatment
Mhm.
for my part to play, and by that I'm talking like legit focused counseling on like what's
Right,
what
'cause-
there's treatment on the family's part of it as well.
So if you've gotten to the point where you feel like this addict needs treatment or whatever that looks like for but
Yeah.
needs help, it's because you have a problem with what they're doing,
Right.
right? So if you don't do something to understand how to keep, what I mean, the problem isn't you as a person,
Right.
and you probably have made mistakes as a family member,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you might even feel a little bit of shame or whatever that is.
Oh, yeah.
But you need to get over it, because guess what? It's time to move forward, and if you don't want that stuff to continue to happen, then you should be involved. And then if it does continue to happen, then you need to know how to protect yourself,
Right.
and how to manage without that person being in your life, because you're gonna have to figure out how to keep yourself healthy,
Right.
because that's what it's all about,
Yeah.
is how do we remain healthy so that this person can't continue to come in and just screw everything
Yeah.
up. I wanted to say
Thank you.
that.
Thank you.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But I do have a question. So in treatment, they have groups, right? Like they do. Like, what does a day look like in treatment? I don't even remember.
Yeah. What,
I remember
what
we
can
used
you
to have to go-
share?
Mhm. Well, so first to comment on what you guys were saying, like you said, the family goes through their own treatment. Addiction is chaos.
Yeah.
Point blank. Period.
Right.
This family has, by the time they reach treatment, it's usually not after one night of partying.
Right.
This family is boiled. Everybody, including the addict itself. This family is boiled down to their core survival methods, their core coping skills.
Mm-hmm.
You can imagine just years of not knowing if your spouse is coming home or not. And so you're prepared in the morning, okay, I have to handle everything by myself. And then on top of that, waiting for the phone call, either in jail, hospital, or it's the cops and it's the morgue, and the shame, the guilt from your husband being on the jail roster, your wife being on the jail roster.
Right.
This is constant walking on eggshells, bills not being paid, the uncertainty, and then when you throw kids in it, constantly shielding your kids, from their parent,
Right.
or whatever. I mean, they're suffering for a long time, so it might not necessarily the family may not even be able to begin to think about their role in it,
Mm-hmm.
because they're just surviving.
Right.
at
The mind
that
is
point.
frayed.
Yeah, and so sometimes to get somebody out and to go to treatment is to give them a breath of fresh air, just a second without that chaos, to be able to breathe and just for the first time look up,
Mhm.
instead of just
Imagine how
waiting.
that feels to them too. I never really thought about that. That it would take that for them to be able to breathe, and imagine the guilt they must feel. Like, God, it sucks that I have to have this person out of my life for a little bit just to be able to feel, for a moment. Like
Well, it's like
such a weird way. I
It's
don't know that side of it.
it's
you
a
know,
very
but,
stormy feeling.
Yeah.
It's a very stormy feeling. There's a lot of um the storm. There's a lot of emotion tied into
Oh,
that.
for
Even
sure.
even by degree. Maybe it's not in your home, but by connection. There's an emotional storm, not just a physical storm, but an emotional storm of uh, you're going through grief, anger, depression, um, in the
Loss.
midst. I mean, yeah, you're feeling all this. You get that sometimes, even you get that feeling that you have to look over your shoulder because what's going to come your way, and that's just the family dealing with that storm, whether it's immediate in your house or via connections, and so you feel that emotional storm. And so to have that person enter treatment, it's the storm goes from, we had a massive hurricane go through our area, and when we lived in South Texas, and that was an adventure. As you go from that kind of level of storm to a small shower. Like if the storm's not over, because yes, this loved one is still, they're in treatment, they're still dealing with this mess, but you're not having the trees fall down. You're not having the wind come and blow your roof off your house. You're not dealing with that level of storm. But because you still love the individual, regardless of what they've done, like there is still this
You
emotional
got to wonder
connection.
if that person's going to love you back,
Yeah.
too.
So that's why I like using that
'Cause-
example at the range.
Because you're so used to the way things are that you send them off to go do something and change their lives and become somebody different. Whatever that means.
Mhm.
To, is this person going to still love me? When they're not using, and I guess I never really thought that one through, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a complex, and a lot of times it's the distance that you need to actually get both parties.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, a lot of relationships and addiction, whether it is a romantic relationship or a familial relationship, is very codependent.
Mhm.
And so we try to, monitor that, and we try to help with that. But ultimately, we don't block people's access to their loved ones. Like
Right.
that's a big. We do for like the first 72 hours.
Right.
We're going to ask you not to use the phone. If it's an emergency, if your family calls the staff and says, I need him to call me back, yes, immediately.
Right.
So we're not completely, but we need them to focus on what they're trying to do and get settled in. And the first 72 hours is the key. That's the time that the withdrawals are going to hit. That's the time where, the fear is going to be the hardest, and they're
Mhm.
going to call and I want to go home.
Right.
And a lot of times, that is the time where we need them to focus. But if you're calling home every 10 minutes instead of looking around and getting acclimated, and a lot of times I've seen the guy in treatment gets the phone call and it's, somebody says something, it's bad news from home, it's, something, to distract him from what he's trying to do,
Right.
There's always a reason to go out and use again. So I do have a question. I guess beyond the whole, what does the day look like? Do they do step work there? I guess I don't even know. Do they do any of that stuff?
That
anymore?
depends on the treatment center.
Okay.
And so like when we were talking about the family involvement, the family has separate classes in my particular treatment center here in Albert Lee. The family does family education without the addict.
Oh, awesome.
So it's just the family with a licensed LADC.
Awesome.
And then they also do a session with the addict too.
Okay.
And then, like you said, Al-Anon is a huge thing. It's 1 hour with a counselor is not going to change everything.
Right.
It's got to be long term because it took a long time to get to this, and so it's going to take a long time to get back.
Mhm.
But it's about the people remaining healthy. Because a lot of times it's not necessarily the family who, you made a comment, about how the family knew there was a problem and that's why they put them in treatment. A lot of times the family waits for the court to put them in treatment.
Mhm.
A lot of times families
and
just
you wish
step
they
back
didn't have
because
to
they
do
don't want to be the bad guy and they don't want to get the
Yes.
anger.
That's it. You'd rather let the courts be the bad guy so you can maintain a status quo, happy relationship with your loved one, instead of intervening early enough before the court. Because yes, the courts are the bad guy, but the courts make things a little bit messier for the individual, not necessarily for
Yes.
the family, but for the individual. Because now they got court dates, now they got a record, and now they've got all these other things because it took the courts getting involved.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas if the family would, you know what, let the family get involved before the courts do. Yes, you might be public enemy number one for a short season. I think that's the big thing is short, is because once that loved one comes through treatment, they're in a healthy place. Wow, mom, dad, thank you so much for
Yeah.
saving me.
And even when they're making threats, let's say an addict feels backed into a corner, you're dropping them off at treatment and they're making all sorts of threats to you.
Mm-hmm.
That addict by definition
I've done that.
has nothing to back up the threats.
No.
Right. Yeah.
They have no resources.
Right.
A lot of it is just throwing out threats.
You're hurting me, so I'm gonna hurt you as much as I can because I don't like what I'm. It's the cat's in the corner.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a lot of times it's about calling them on that, and it's about standing your ground. You know, it's dropping them off, and I'm not picking you up until your counselor says that you're getting out this date at this time.
So then, let's, to kind of take it from here. The family's gone through the treatment. They've done the counseling sessions and like the classes that they got to take, which I think is phenomenal that they have those classes. I think that is fantastic. What is it like then for those final weeks that they're in, like I say weeks, if it's 28 days, what is it like that last week of treatment?
So first, I'll go through a normal day in treatment. You know, you get up and you take your medications, unless you need food with your medications.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a better place in the world than in a treatment center to get started on medications. You know, at home, I might forget that I need to eat with that.
Right.
But your nurse is not going to.
No.
You know, and they will be on top of that. They know exactly who needs what medications at what times, and you know, they don't play around with that. A lot of times in treatment, you find that you are sicker than you thought you were.
Wow.
Because not a lot of people want to make a doctor's appointment while they're getting high. You know, so a lot of times you get in there and you're like, wow, what is this pain?
Yeah.
And it turns out that you've been aging for the last 10 years, you know, while you were high.
Surprise.
Yeah. And a lot of times, you know, you don't realize. Like for me, I did not know I had an ulcer. It was a horrible, you know, just about bleeding ulcer because it hurt. And then I drank another 4 drinks and it went away.
Yeah.
You know, and so I found out in treatment that I had an ulcer. I also had my first panic attack. You know, and so I was able to get on the right medications and take care of myself in that way. So you get up and you take your meds, then you're provided breakfast. Nobody eats better than when you're in treatment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not just, you know, the drugs and alcohol. We help with everything.
One of the funny things is because talk about getting healthy and like your everything's being like the meds, the drugs, the medicine. That's what I meant by drugs. Sorry. The food, everything going on there, and just the health. I have in my line of work. It's so funny because I get to see people when they enter in treatment, and they look like they're in their 50s, but they're actually in their mid 30s. And then when they come out of treatment, they look like they're in their mid 30s. It's like they age backward. When you see those before and after photos, there's this vast difference on with a person, like you look younger coming out of treatment than when you went in.
Yeah, we get them healthy.
Yeah.
You know, in all aspects. So we feed them, you know, from all of the food groups. If you are a diabetic, we take care of that.
Oh,
you know, you have special diets. If you need low sodium, we take care of that. You know, so it's not one size fits all. We do everything we can. If you have an allergy, you wear a bright red bracelet. So we know for a fact. We check your name with your picture with your lunch tray.
So physically, you take care of them.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I got the honor when it was still new a couple of years ago. It was still relatively new, but the Teen Challenge in Rochester took a bunch of us area clergy, and I say area, I mean like southeast Minnesota, and we got to tour the women's facility of Teen Challenge and how amazing it was. And one of the things that was amazing in there is that they had a whole it was not excessively large, but they had a gym. They had a gym area, treadmills, free weights, some elliptical machines. So you talk about taking care of their body and getting healthy. My assumption is that other treatment centers kind of have that same those things where they have, hey, you have the opportunity to exercise to get healthy.
Yes. So after breakfast, then you go to all your classes. These are different classes. They're built for specific reasons. You have a co-occurring class, so you learn about multiple different things. You have classes on coping skills. You have classes on family relations. You have, you know, private groups with just the patients and the counselor. And there's a lot of tears. People are letting things out. And that's what creates the closeness. You know, in treatment, it's not necessarily the programming, which, you know, is amazing in itself, but it's the peers.
Yeah.
You get close, you get vulnerable, and the people around you do too. You know, men don't cry. Well, there's 15 men in a room crying, you know, and so that creates that atmosphere, you know, and the staff, you know, we try to help encourage that also, you know. You don't be somebody else in treatment because then you're trying to heal somebody else. You need to heal yourself, you know, and so we do try with that.
So
you know, lot of breaks.
Physical, mental.
We, water and snacks and drinks and, like you said, more meds, and then recreation. In our treatment center, we have a set amount of time. I think it's like an hour and a half, and we do different things all the time. We go out on nature walks. We work with the community education. We do rock walls. We do bike rides. We do, but we cater to the person with the most limitations.
Right.
Because we're not going to go hiking with somebody who has a broken foot.
Yeah.
And so we do make that accessible. And sometimes if there's bad weather, we stay inside and we make dream catchers,
Okay.
and we do all sorts of things to keep them physically active, like you said, although we also have a gym.
Yeah. Well, and it's Minnesota, and winter's coming, so that probably means a lot of indoor stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But you can go different places for indoor stuff. You
Yeah.
know, there's a lot of different, there's the YMCA and all sorts of different things. And we cater it specifically to that person. If we know that, maybe you have not done a lot with your leg muscles,
Right.
we're going to specifically encourage you, today at rec, I challenge you to walk, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so we keep track of that also. We monitor people. You have asthma. We know exactly who needs their inhalers, who needs EpiPens. We bring all that with.
They don't. They have nothing. They carry nothing on them.
Nope.
It's all dependent upon the nurses and those.
We
the
take
treatment
care of
specialists.
everything. We transport them. We bring them back. More classes, and then a lot of free time. They
Mhm.
do have homework. Treatment plans, things to work on for themselves. They have TVs. They mostly watch a lot of TV, do some homework, hang out and play games, play the guitar, just take naps in their room. A lot of them need a lot of sleep to catch up on,
Mhm.
and eat.
Yeah.
Eat a lot. We call it the treatment 20 because you usually gain 20 pounds.
Yeah. Well,
in
because
treatment.
you see people and because again they've aged so much, and so they're really gaunt in their appearance,
Mhm.
and a lot of it is because I'm being fed by my addiction, and so I'm not, drug by drug. Sometimes yes, they might have the munchies, but it's not healthy munchies.
No.
But then you have some drug they take doesn't make them hungry. It bypasses that whole hungry
Oh,
feeling,
yeah.
so they don't eat at all, and so the body takes on itself basically.
Yeah.
And so going through that treatment, hey, you're going to eat because you're going to get.
Oh, we have an amazing amount of food. We have the 3 meals a day, which is the full spectrum, and then we also have a kitchen that is full, fridges that are full, cupboards that are full, microwaves, fruit,
All the men are like, man, I need to go to treatment because there's a lot of food.
There's so much food.
Right. So this is a physical, mental, and spiritual disease.
Yeah.
So in treatment, they address the physical, obviously, and the mental.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. So my question is, when we get to the point where you start to see growth in that person and they're getting ready to leave, do you just you just throw them out, or
God, no.
Okay, so what's kind of I'm because I don't remember exactly, but my curiosity is what kind of preparation do you give these guys or these gals, because I would imagine that there's a lot of fear for them when they're starting to get to that point where they're going to go out, because you physically have made them at least somewhat healthy.
Yeah.
Mentally you've prepared them.
Mm-hmm.
As far as these are because you're teaching classes on what does addiction look like, how do we work.
Oh, yeah.
Just the whole spectrum of it, right? So, but I don't but that's just treatment. So once you're done with treatment, you actually have to go back to life.
Yes.
And there is a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so what kind of preparations would occur, and even for the family, like what kind of things should they be thinking about, or should they be or the people who love them or surround them, or things like that. So, and I know that's a lot to pack into one question, but
no, I got what you're saying.
Okay.
So and also you forgot spiritual.
I didn't forget it because I just think that spiritual doesn't. It occurs later on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe that was just for me, and so I shouldn't say that. I understand. Do you guys actually work on that part of it?
Oh, for sure. We
You
don't
do?
necessarily
I did not know that.
we don't necessarily like have a class on it or anything, but you're not going to find a treatment center that is going to block somebody from practicing.
Sure.
Like for our treatment center, it is we make it a point, church is available every Sunday morning.
Right.
We can't leave the facility and go, but you can bring up, we have a live stream for, you know, different churches here in the area.
So it's available.
And then
that kind
I have also gone, you know, to make sure that we cater to every religion. I bought different Muslim prayer rugs. I have ordered the Quran. I ordered a Native American smudging kit, with which a patient asked me to do. So
Wow.
that was cool.
you look like that. So when I was saying that though, I wasn't saying that like you guys can only do those two things. You can help them in a physical and a mental.
Yes, and we can.
But spiritually, that's a personal journey,
Mhm.
and that's something that I feel like the further you get along into your, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, they talk about spiritual awakenings, things like that, and that could occur in
Yeah.
treatment. But I didn't bring that into it because it's, to me, it's a whole.
It is a
thing.
whole thing. I just wanted to make sure that it is known that, you know, sometimes
Those types of things
people
are
feel like
bad.
it's a barrier. You know,
Mhm.
if I need to pray a certain amount of times a day at that time, am I going to be able to
Right.
Right.
at your facility?
Okay, I get what you're saying.
You know, and our answer is, every treatment center's answer is yes.
yeah.
Right.
You know,
It's
we are.
available.
That's
Because again, we want to remove any barrier that's going to keep you from being healthy.
yes.
Yeah.
You know, not only some people come straight from jail, maybe you won't have your religious artifacts. You know, maybe you won't have your rugs or
Mhm.
what you need. Well, then we're going to work with you and we're going to get you that, you know, because that's equally as important. Like I said, it's the holistic, it's all the way around. But as far as like leaving, we try to work on that right away. You know, in the first couple days, you're going to be detoxing. You're not going to be, I don't want to overwhelm you.
Right.
But if I know you came in homeless, my priority, I have 28 days to find you a good aftercare.
Right.
You know, and so we don't leave that to the last minute. We
Right.
work on that, and the patient is involved with that also. You know,
Okay.
you'll come to me and you'll say, you know, I need sober housing after this. And I'll say, okay. And I will say, where were you thinking? You know, and I'll know a little bit of your background. Is this a town, you know, where's your stomping grounds, and do we need to get away from that?
Right.
Where are your children located? Because we want to make sure we stay close to that.
Well, and that's like staying close to loved ones, that familiar connection.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if the stomping grounds are not healthy, we don't want to put you in that place. So
Yes.
there's like that healthy medium where, like, yes, we want to get you as close to your family as you can, but that stomping ground, you grew up in that area, you know where all the dealers are.
Yep.
So let's put you someplace else.
But it's complicated, and
Yeah.
ultimately it's up to the patient, because I
Yes.
could place you in Minneapolis and you can get there and then take a bus to wherever you want.
Right.
You know, so ultimately we have to, and we consider the family.
Yes.
You know, I myself went home to my children
Mhm.
when I got out, because I didn't have, there was no other, you know,
Right.
that was it. And so we work with people like that too. And some families, they're not ready for their loved one to come home yet.
Mhm.
You know, there's still anger, and there's still, you know, and some families, they are, you know, he needs to come home and help pay the bills, and, you know, we've got a mortgage and 5 kids together, and, you know, whatever. And we work with the patient. We don't just, you're going there now.
Right.
You
So
know?
it's an individual plan that you.
It is. It's
very
customized.
individualized.
It's individual. We encourage people to think about halfway housing. 28 days is it's just not a lot.
No.
You know,
Yeah,
it's-
It's really
you're barely scratching the surface of getting new habits being built.
And sometimes it's about building a life. Like,
Yeah.
you know, we'll say an example, a patient comes in and they're homeless, you know,
Mhm.
and they don't have anything, you know, that just nothing. They've lost everything. My goal is to get you into sober housing, but also on top of that, somewhere you can work,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can get your feet under you. So
Right.
we do that. We get you in a sober house, you get a job day one, eventually you buy a car, and then you have enough money for an apartment and you have a job. I mean, that's
So
an opportunity most people don't have.
So the sober house is, whether it's called like a halfway house, a sober house, whatever title it is, it's this idea of, we're covering you right here. You're going to work so that where you're no longer dependent upon us.
Yep.
You're staying healthy, but now you're not dependent upon us.
Yes, with programming. Your number one priority is programming. A lot of times we have people who want to come through treatment, and then their first priority is to get out, and I'm going to work 60 hours a week, and I need to do this, this, and this. And I understand that. As somebody who has children and bills, I understand that.
Right.
But at the same time, you get out, you work 40 hours, you work 50, then you work 60. You're having trouble staying awake to do 60 on top of the rest of your life. You take something to stay awake, and pretty soon you're back in treatment.
The programming for healthy living.
You know.
There's a reason why. It's so funny, working some Bible into this. When God was giving the commands and the law to the Israelites in the Old Testament, He's like, you're gonna work these many days. You're gonna take this day off. You're gonna work this many years, and then the land has to have rest for an extra year. You're gonna work, and so He programmed days of rest in there that they had to abide by. And when they did not abide by it, that's when messes started occurring. And so it's kind of the same principle here. Your body can only sustain so many hours of work before you have to become dependent upon something else.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to put you in a program that is going to effectually limit you to this many hours so that you can function well.
Well, and it's not just work. Like some people, you broke your back, and that's why you started using in the first place. Working may not be an option.
Right.
But for us, essentially what a sober house is you can leave. You still have a lot of freedoms.
Yeah.
You're not stuck in the house, but you have a backup net. You have staff and people there, and other people. You leave, and let's say you get a phone call, and the wreckage of your past keeps coming even after you get out 28 days later. So you go to a family function, somebody said something triggering or whatever. You have a really bad day. Your kid brings up something, whatever. You can go home, and instead of being in an apartment by yourself across the street from a bar, you're going to go home to 6 other guys who are completely in the same position, who totally understand, and who will help support you. And that's the difference. When somebody has a hard day, rather than going home by themselves or going home to maybe a roommate who has no idea how to deal with this, you can go home to a different place that's right there and is a safety net for you.
A lot of times people, when they enter treatment, they've got a whole cache of reputation and stories and junk that they carry, and it's not when I say they carry, what I mean is other people have their opinions of this individual. And so when they come out, kind of like what you said, you're coming out and people are still thinking the old ways about you. Even though you're clean, even though you're healthy and you're strong, you still have these old reputations that people see. And now you're in this place where I'm fixing that. And I love the idea of that, the sober housing, because then there's other men or women, women on women, men on men, where they enter that environment and they have a group of people that understand exactly what that is like and the stress that carries with them. And in a sense, it kind of creates a brotherhood of sorts.
It does. It really does.
It also allows for a person to make certain milestones, So you set a goal, and as an addict, I would set a goal and I never accomplish it because I'm an addict and all I want to do is get high. Well, when you get clean, you start to make these little things happen for your life, and it's nice, I would imagine, when you have an environment where it kind of it waters that for you to flourish. And so the more that you accomplish, whatever that is, because it could be just little things, the more secure you start to become in your own recovery. And so it makes total sense to me for someone to go to sober house, halfway house. I understand why sometimes that's not possible, but the whole point in having those people that you would go back to involved in the treatment is because then that can also allow for someone to flourish and to be able to accomplish some of that, as well as them doing it. And when you're growing with somebody else, which is what she's kind of talking about, the camaraderie, I say that right?
You said it right.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a halfway house is that you're growing together, or even in treatment, you're growing together, and you're making yourself vulnerable to somebody else, which is for a man, it has a tendency to be a little bit more complicated, but when you grow with somebody else, it's a support, it's like so my sponsor and me have we used together, and then we found each other in recovery, and we've grown together in a lot of ways, and so that bond and that support is rock solid, and and having those people surround me in particular, I'll say, is that it's allowed for me to do good things, and accomplish things in my life that I didn't know were possible. That's the weird part about recovery, is that you think this high, and then you find yourself up here and you're like, wow, did that happen?
Yeah.
And so that is the benefit of recovery, and I love that they try to, I don't want to say cater, because that sounds kind of weird, but I love that they allow for them to actually do that, kind of flourish in an environment that's healthy. And I mean, you guys are actually involved in the house, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right. So you guys, and how long is that? Like 3 to 6 months?
So here in town, it's 30 to 90 days, we say, but you can always file extensions.
Right.
And so you can choose to stay longer. We currently have 10 beds at our house here in town. Beautiful house. I mean, it's very large. But we're trying to get 12 beds.
Right.
So and then we provide everything, the same amount of food as when you're in residential. So people with food insecurities and things like that, you don't have to worry about that. And then we also have a snack. So people just keep, and then
keep eating.
Oh, yeah.
I hear snacks.
Just so you know,
yes.
When you get into recovery, you tend to gain weight.
Yes, it happens.
Good.
Well,
But they also do programming. So they do 20 hours a week of programming, of groups, and they do their own rec, so you get out and exercise, they do a lot of different things like that. It's right on the lake. They have bikes, they have beanbag boards in the driveway, they have a basketball hoop set up. And family is involved. They can leave at any time and go to family. Family can still be involved in their treatment. Family is just not allowed in the house, because if you're walking through the hallway and my mom comes over, now we're breaking that confidentiality. Maybe you didn't want somebody to, be outside your bedroom,
Right.
So
Well,
we do have those limits.
That kind of answers my question, because my question I had was, okay, now they're in that house, how does it, what is the class like? What is the family connection occurring during that time as well? So that kind of answers that. Like, they're not available at the house, but they can still, there's connections. They're still going to classes.
Yep. I've got a family barbecue Sunday. I'm gonna go to that.
The work continues, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
It doesn't just stop after treatment. It doesn't just stop in treatment. It continues. So, because one of the things that I continue to say is that I will always be an addict. Always. And recovery is a lifelong endeavor.
Yes.
And so I think sometimes that a family member might look at it like, okay, he's done treatment, he's good, we're good. Yeah. That's just not the way it is. And,
yes.
Yeah.
And
that's what outpatient is for also.
Right.
Most outpatients is going to be 9 hours a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 3 hours. In Albert Lea, we offer, I actually work with the outpatients of Albert Lea, Austin, Owatonna, Fairmont, Faribault, Rochester, and Mankato. So I have a lot of ground that I cover. And so we do, when you first get out, it's going to be 3 times a week. We set your initial intake appointment for outpatient almost the day or the day after you get out of treatment. We want you to immediately.
So you get out, and then you're going to be here tomorrow. You're going to be back here tomorrow, 9 a.m. For 9 a.m.
We don't want to leave you without support.
Yeah.
And so we do that, and then it's 3 hours that day. It comes with routine drug testing for accountability.
Yep.
you know, so you have something. I spoke with somebody the other day and they said, I was so angry that I had to attend this because they feel like I've done 28 days. I've done so much work.
Mhm.
Like I should be done.
Right.
But at the end of it, a lot of times, like I spoke with somebody who said the other day, I am sad that I'm going to be leaving, you
Right.
know? So you go, generally it's, you know, the regular, and that's 9 hours a week. And then you step down
Mhm.
and that's 3 hours a week. So it's just 1 day a week. And so we don't just drop you.
Yeah.
You know, that's not what any treatment center wants to do.
And I think the important part for the family to recognize that is because yes, it is very easy to say they got their certificate, they're done, it's all over, they've did their part. But I think from somebody who cares about families and wanting healthy families, not just healthy individuals, but healthy families, the idea of continued treatment is so important to me, like beyond
For
that.
sure.
Because as a father, do I really want to limit um, what the health and the type of relationship I want with my family? Like what? Because you know, as a parent, I'm thinking 2 or 3 generations ahead.
Yeah.
And what kind of relationship do I want to have with my grandchildren? You know, God willing, that I get to see my own grandkids. What kind of relationship do I want to have with them? What kind of relationship do I want to have with my grown child?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean I want to dictate what kind of job he's going to have? No, no, I don't want to dictate what he does for a living or anything like that. But what kind of a relationship? Like when my son wants to propose to a certain young woman, who's going to be the first person he calls to say, "Dad, I'm going to do this"? Who, you know, when my children are pregnant for the first time, who are they going, like, who do I want to be that first phone call?
Yeah, for sure.
And so having that kind of that strong, healthy, not dependency, not abuse, but that healthy, long term, what kind of a possible healthy family can I have?
Mm-hmm.
And to play that long game out, even when it comes to treatment. So in treatment, it's like, hey, for your loved one, whether it's a child that's in treatment, whether it's a spouse in treatment, or a sibling, or whichever, or a parent even. What kind of relationship can we build from that going forward and play the long game?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
That's it. Well, I mean, that makes sense. It's kind of like, okay, so we'll just use the bulletin board over there. You know, you got all kinds of chaos written on there, right? So then you go to treatment and you're slowly erasing all these little chaoses, right? Well, then all of a sudden you don't necessarily know who you are
mm-hmm.
because you've known yourself as an addict for a very long time.
Right.
So now you have to figure out what it is, who you are,
right,
what it is you want to write about yourself. You know what I mean? Those kinds of things. So yeah, it's the long game, obviously, that you would want. You know, part of the problem with being an addict is that I can see the long game and I could find a quick way to fuck it up real quick.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse my language. You know, I all of a sudden it's like, you know what, I can't do this, or I can't handle this, or whatever it may be, and then all of a sudden that's gone, right? You know, but the goal here is that you rewrite yourself. You know, there are things about you,
mm-hmm.
even in your addiction, that are still good. You know, and that's the part that that sometimes I find disturbing, is that my case, my instance, okay, is that everything that was ever written about me, everything that was talked about me, everything was always bad.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It was like, you know, but the truth of the matter is that I've always had a big heart. I've always cared about other people, and you know, and there are things that I've done that were good, you know, but you don't see that because that addiction kind of overwhelms it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
well, that's like you know, how many women addicts, they want to be good mothers, like the desire, and there's been moments where they make great
fathers too.
Great, yeah, fathers, parents, like you want to be a fantastic parent, and you have those fantastic good moments, but it's overshadowed by the addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this, hey, yeah, this person's a wonderful parent, but
Right.
they're in this mess. And so
Mm-hmm.
playing that long game, does that kind of, and so I love seeing that the family stuff continues after that, like the family classes. Now, are there classes that family classes and I'm going to call counseling because I don't know what else to call those moments with the addict. Is there stuff that happens when they come out of the sober housing? Like they're dependent. They don't need that sober housing anymore. They're able to move out, reintegrate into society. Is there still those? Is there options for that continued building in those
Yeah,
classes?
so that's still outpatient.
Okay.
They can be an outpatient for quite a while. And then the outpatient, same as treatment, will still incorporate the family.
Okay.
But the family can do their own legwork also.
Right.
And they can do a lot. We rely on the family a lot. Say this guy really would benefit from a sober house, and I say guy because I work with mostly men. Say he would really benefit from a sober house, but he says no. There is nothing we can do about that.
Right.
Now say his family says, but you're not coming here.
Right.
I guess he has to go to a sober house because he has nowhere else to go. That's a card the family
Manipulation at
can.
its finest.
Right.
Great. But it's a good manipulation.
Yeah,
Good.
that's
Yeah.
our hands are tied with that, but the family can do that.
Right.
Same with going to a meeting.
Yeah.
I always encourage everyone, go to a meeting the day you get out of treatment because you're not going to want to go.
Right.
And then the next day you're not going to want to go because it's your first full day out of treatment. Maybe I sleep in. Maybe I, eat Big Macs all day, whatever. And then the day after that, well, now I got a job hunt.
Mm-hmm.
A week later, you've got your kids and your great aunts in town and there's a barbecue. And then 6 months later, you're sitting in treatment looking at me going, what happened?
Right.
So that's important. The day I got out of treatment, my sister picked me up. She stayed with me all day long.
Yeah.
She didn't let me out of her sight. And then she took me to a meeting that night.
Yeah.
That's family involvement. She loves me, but she's not going to love me into the grave. She
Right.
was loving me to a meeting. What people don't always realize is
Yeah.
meetings, if they're open meetings, which we have a lot, just, they're online, they will say open. That
Yeah.
means anybody can come. Anybody. That means if your son is struggling and he does not want to go to a meeting, but you want to know more, show up.
Yeah.
That means if you're a nurse who's getting into the addictions department, show up. That means
Yeah.
if you're a drug and alcohol counselor, if you're a pastor who wants to know more about addiction,
Yeah.
if they say I'm scared to go to a meeting, which I can understand,
Right.
I'm not only is it my first meeting, I'm admitting I'm an addict, but I'm going to go in a room with God knows who,
Right.
and I'm going to sit down, and that's terrifying.
Oh yeah.
Bring someone.
Well,
If you go and it's horrible, you can laugh about it later and be like, remember that time where we went there and it was absolutely horrible, and then try again.
The awkward factor was way up here.
Or if it's awesome,
Yeah.
and your family member on top of that gets to experience that and gets to meet people and see how people can change. And sometimes your best friend was there and you were like, what are you doing here? I thought you were in jail. And they're like, no, I've been here this whole time, And so I encourage, go to a meeting. For family members, go to meetings, go to Al-Anon, do your own legwork. There's a lot of resources around there. And a lot of times, the family can do more than professionals can.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is that, and that's, I think going the thing we've always talked about: healthy people help other people stay healthy. That the addict's getting healthy, so they need to come back to where there's a community that's healthy waiting for them, and that's important, because again, that family's got to be in that place where the foot's down. Yes, I love you. I'm taking you to treatment. Yes, I love you. So for accountability purposes, we're gonna do random testing, just at random, because I love you, and really, I know, should we even say, treat them like a little kid again, because with little kids, the healthy, how many of us have boundaries that are, hey, my child can't do this, my child can't do that, my child can't do that, hey, my child's gluten free, my child is sugar free, my child's red dye free, my child is only allowed to watch 1 hour of television a day. Like we put these boundaries when we raise our kids.
Because you love them and left their own devices, they will eat candy till their teeth fall out.
Right? They will sit there and they'll be running up and down the hallways, putting holes in the walls. And but that's and so going back to that person coming out, it's like, hey, we love you.
Mm-hmm.
Drawing board time. You
Yes.
know, we're gonna help you
Follow through.
Yes.
There has to be follow through. There has to be definitely boundaries. But the one thing that I guess I would want everybody to understand is that you're not required to do anything, you know. And loving an addict is difficult, to say the very least.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't participate, if you're very involved, obviously there are people who are not, you know, but if you're involved in that person's life and you love them, you know, you want to make sure that you remain healthy and that you set those boundaries and that you follow through with them. Because guess what? If I go back out and use, I'm useless and worthless to you in the first place. And, you know, I mean, like, I'm not, you know, they always say you can change one thing to have everything, right? Or you can change everything to have one thing. And what they're talking about is I can change using and have everything else, or I can change everything to have or did I just say that right?
You
To
give
have
up
the one.
everything for one thing,
Right.
and you gave up one thing for everything.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and that's now, if you think about that a little in depth, what they're saying is that when I'm using, I have given up everything, and I am not going to be any good to anyone or anybody or anything, I should say, you know. And so, what's the goal? The goal is to make sure that I am not giving up everything for that one thing, and in order to do that, you know, if I'm around a bunch of addicts
Mm-hmm.
who are still using, that's not healthy.
No.
That's not going to help me. That's not going to, you know. So so if it, and I'm, it's so hard to explain, especially when it comes to family and things like that. So if I go back into an environment that still is running and functioning as if I'm using,
You're
where
gonna
am I
fall
gonna
back,
go?
and I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought up the friends, because that's a huge part of it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it is not. I've seen a lot of people relapse in my field, and also just in addiction.
Yeah.
It is not a bottle of whiskey that rang your doorbell.
No.
Right.
You know, a pipe is not going to send you a Snapchat.
Right.
It's the people holding them, and they're not necessarily bad people either,
No.
but they are addicts,
Right.
and misery loves company. You know, and they don't, you know, they don't mean it. But if you would have asked me, can I get sober and stay sober for my best friend? The answer probably would have been no.
Yeah.
And I'm not a bad person.
Right.
It's just the disease. You know, so a lot of times it's either blare your sobriety so loud that people don't want to come around you.
Right.
Scatter. Right.
Or delete what you have to delete, you know.
Yeah.
Do not allow the same friends over. And nowadays with social media, like I tell my patients, there's people on your Facebook you haven't seen in 5 years.
Right.
You know, sometimes if it's not possible to cut off your relationship with your toxic mother, you know, or whatever, a family member in active addiction themselves,
Right.
stick to Zoom.
Right.
Stick to Facebook.
Yeah.
You know, protect yourself.
Have that distance.
It's better, you know, I'm not going to drink poison to see if maybe I can handle it, right? I'm just not going to test it.
Right.
You know, I'm just going to stay safe. And so that's a lot of it is the friendships and things like that. And sometimes you just have to give up. And I always weighed my children against somebody.
Yeah.
You know, and I always chose my children.
You don't get burned if you don't play fire in the first place.
Exactly.
And so that's why this whole idea of, well, I'm only doing it once or twice. No, I'm not going around it at all. I'm not gonna be around that old group of people who are still involved in it. Why? Because it's the equivalent of I'm gonna touch fire. I'm gonna play with fire.
Mm-hmm.
And you know
That's a good way for the family to look at it too.
Yeah.
On the other side of that is that, you know, I'm not going to do this because then I'm playing with fire, irregardless of what the addict decides or does or whatever else. Is that you know, if you can stay in that healthy state of mind, you protect yourself.
Yeah.
And you force, you know, like I said, it has a tendency to box somebody in so that they don't, you know, their circle isn't like this, it's like this, you know.
Right.
Yep.
And that causes problems for the addict, you know, but ultimately you do right by yourself. And you know, who doesn't want to be healthy in life? You know,
Right.
I mean, who doesn't want to smile?
Right.
You know, and actually feel it. You know,
Right.
like, you know, because there were a lot of times in my life when it was like, you know, but there was no happiness
Mm-hmm.
behind that. There was no real joy, and and in order for you to really experience those things, you need, I shouldn't say you need, but in my experience, I had to become healthy in the way I was thinking.
Yeah.
I had to become healthy physically and spiritually, you know, and those are the key components to this whole thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I want there's something I want to pull in because you know the whole idea of happy and healthy and all that. The uh, I picture the question in my head, and getting into words is always the tricky part. Um, the success rate, and I want to be mindful of this, and I'm saying success rate very very loosely because it defines somebody crossing a finish line, and there is no finish line. But maybe the longevity of recovery, maybe that might be the best way to look at it, is how much does a loving uh, partnering home contribute to someone, like you know, if someone came on their own without any loved ones surrounding them, or versus an individual who had their whole family behind them, what is the success rate? If I want to, you know, for people who are might be a little more analytical, what how much more effective is the entire family behind someone getting clean
Oh,
versus somebody coming in by themselves?
just an incredible amount, you know, and not just that, but there's ways to increase your odds. Unfortunately, in addiction, the odds are not good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's just how it is. And that's tough for those of us who work in this field because
Yeah.
if I were an NFL quarterback and you told me I'm only gonna, you know, make one of 100 throws, that's crazy.
Right.
I'm gonna go cut hair,
Right.
you know. But those of us in this field, you know, even if the chances are slim, the chances are slim to win the Powerball, right?
Right.
But you still play,
Right.
you know. And that's the same thing. You can't, you know, you don't want to be like, I probably won't succeed, so I'm not going to try anyways. That's just crazy.
Right.
Nobody would go to college if they thought, what if I don't pass?
Right.
You know, and all sorts of things. You never go on a date. You know, what if I never get married? You know,
Right.
just the whole life is based on the what ifs and going anyways and trying anyways. You know, and you never undo recovery. If you go
Right.
out there and you make a mistake and you have to start back, that time is still there.
Right.
You know, you can never, nobody can take that back from you.
Yeah.
The lessons are still there. And so when it comes to increasing odds, I know for a fact having a loving family increases your odds just exponentially. I don't know the actual number.
Mm-hmm.
Now with support groups, we're
Right.
talking NA, AA, Al-Anon, you are 60% more likely
Okay.
to increase your likelihood of long-term sobriety.
Oh.
And that is an incredible number.
So I love that because that's kind of the idea too with the community connections is families be behind those. Yes, they might have burned you, they might have hurt you, but you need to be supportive and behind the effort to helping them, that loved one, get clean.
Well, and it's not just for the loved one. I
Yeah.
mean, to be perfectly, you know, just blatant out there, it's also for yourself. We have a lot of families who guilt, shame, things like that. Regret is the one thing that you can't change. If you regret something, no, you can't go back. You know,
Right.
you will regret it forever. You can't just be like, I don't regret it anymore, you know? If my brother is an addict, and one day I'm going to look down at him either in jail, he's either going to end up in jail, he's on a hospital bed, or in a coffin, worst
Right.
case scenarios, right?
Yeah.
Either I can be angry, you know, at him for, you know, I was there, I was in your corner, I give you every chance, you know,
Right.
I'm upset with you because, you know, you had every chance. Or I can be angry at myself because I picked you up from treatment, you know, early. I knew you were going down the wrong way and I stood back. You know, once they're in that situation, once they're facing a judge for God knows how long, you know, once they've made that choice,
Yeah.
you can't go back. So it's better to, in my own, you know, my own welfare for the family themselves. You feel guilty stepping in, but I promise you're going to feel a lot more guilty not stepping in.
It's better to step in and to be in that very hard, very uncomfortable place for a season versus
A lifetime.
the regrets and the defeat. And I think that's a lot of times, like even when a parent has to make the recognition that yes, my child or my loved one is an addict, and they peel back that denial. Um, Recently, and even in the past, how many times have I had talked to individuals, counseled individuals, who, when the denial is peeled back, they feel a sense of shame and regret. They blame themselves for choices that their loved one chose to do on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I say, okay, great, stop that. It's not your fault.
Yes.
It's not. You can't compound that.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have an opportunity. So now you stop that regretful feeling. They made choices. So now are you going to compound the regret and allow them to keep making messes, or are you going to do something about it? And so you have a chance to turn that regret around and do something about it.
I would rather say I did everything that I could, and unfortunately this still ended up the way it is, than I should have done.
Yeah.
Should have.
Or I shouldn't have done.
Yes.
Meaning feeding into it.
Well,
you know.
to use something that an individual told me a couple weeks back, don't should on yourselves. And that's exactly, it's a very timely piece of advice, because you can feel all that stuff and you can question everything, instead of just act and just go forward on it.
Now I know we're probably going to close this, but I wanted to say one thing about what you said, and that was that you need to, and as far as a family member goes, and honestly, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to participate. You don't have to, whatever it is. But the one thing I would like to express is that forgiveness is not about them. It's about you.
Mm-hmm.
Right, you forgiving them is something that works for you, and it's lifting, and it's I don't know how to express that exactly, but
healing.
It's healing. Very good. That's a great word. It's healing for you, and just because you may not feel it, at that moment. Just try to find yourself in forgiveness for the addict, because believe me, we screw up. We make messes, and sometimes we don't even know some of the things, but just so you understand that forgiveness is about you, and you don't need to do anything. This is all just suggestive, and we're not saying there's a problem with you, or there's a problem with this person, or anything like that. That's not the the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The conversation is that, what can we do?
Yeah.
Where can we go? And Jessica is one of those resources that is important, because like we talked about, there's originally we started talking about intervention,
Mm-hmm.
and then we brought Jessica in about how that works, and then how it works as you're starting to come out, what's going on in the treatment. This is about information, and it's not about blaming, it's not about shaming, it's not about any of that. This is about information, because we don't always know. You just don't know.
Well, and that's
and it's not like it's advertised out there like, hey, this is what you do for addicts.
We want to encourage those who are dealing with it in the process. We want to encourage those who have a loved one that they care about, that's motivating them to watch these videos. We want to open up the discussion and peel back the layers and talk openly and very raw about the reality of all this stuff is. And we want people to be encouraged to enter into treatment. And so part of that means removing mental barriers that might, if we can remove whatever excuses, you're going to come up with excuses. I get that. But
There's a ton of them.
but there's a ton. You're come up with excuses.
Starting a
Right?
book.
Yeah.
Right? Just put a book.
The book of excuses.
But if we can help families who answering some of your questions, or maybe even in the midst of our discussion, some of your questions are getting answered, then we've done something. And so it is our hope that you enjoyed this. We're going to wrap up for the sake of time, and this is one of our longer ones, but we're so glad that you were able to take part in this with us. We hope that you have a wonderful day, and we look forward to having more of these sessions together. So, Jessica, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome, and everyone else, just have a great day. God bless.